The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, my. Have you been watching the baseball? Have you seen the names who have been starring, particularly for the Philadelphia Phillies? They're 1, 2, and 3 hitters. Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper. Oh, and do you know who's starting tomorrow night for the Texas Rangers as they go for a 3-0 lead on Houston playing at home? Why, it's Max Scherzer on the mound. And after seeing the Nationals finish last again, you may be saying to yourself, oh, gosh, I wish they would have kept all of those guys. Yeah, the instinct is to say that. But maybe that's not something you would actually wish for. Are you rooting for or against those guys in the postseason? I find myself rooting for them, and I'm going to get into what Tom Boswell wrote this morning about those guys being missing from Washington, but I was talking to our producer Rex Minturn before the show, a young man who has known nothing but Nationals baseball in Washington. In fact, I would think by the time you really became a fan, they were starting to get really good, right? About 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago? Okay, so I grew up here, and we had the expansion Senators, who are now the Texas Rangers. They were bad except for 1 year where they finished 10 games over 500, but nowhere near winning the division as the Orioles won 110 games. And then they left after 71, and we didn't get baseball back here until 2005. So most of my life in Washington, we didn't have baseball here. So my perspective is a little bit different. I look at these guys and say, well, I'm glad they didn't re-sign Bryce Harper because it would not have allowed them to put together a World Series championship team. And I'm happy for the success of Max Scherzer because he wasn't going to be here no matter what at this point. And Kyle Schwarber, well, that's an interesting case, and I'll have some thoughts on that as well. But I don't have any real regrets about watching these guys star in the postseason, but you do to some extent?
No, I just never want to see Philly win anything.
Just Philly. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're rooting
Bryce or no, I never liked Bryce to begin with.
Well, but he didn't, don't you think he brought a level of excitement here? I mean, they started winning when he got here.
Yeah, but he was never my guy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And as far as Scherzer goes,
I love Scherzer.
Yeah.
I love Trey. Love all those guys.
Yeah, and I think Scherzer, when he goes into the Hall of Fame, will probably have a Nationals hat, I would think.
Yeah.
It's where he got his World Series. He got 2 no-hitters here, so I think that a couple of Cy Youngs as well. So I think that's the highlight of his career playing in Washington. But, in his 40s, I guess he's 40, 41, he can add to that playing in Texas. And for somebody like me, I don't know how many of us are still around that might feel this way, but maybe there'll be a little bit of an attachment to that if the Texas Rangers finally win the World Series, that the original expansion Washington Senators will finally have one. It's the longest drought in Major League history, in current baseball now. There's no team that's gone longer without winning a World Series than the Texas Rangers, who started again as the Senators. So there'd be something to that, and to have the attachment of Scherzer would also be kind of a cool thing. All right, here's what Tom Boswell writes today, and the headline pretty much says the whole thing. Their ex-stars are shining, but Nats did the right thing. As soon as I read that, I knew what the column was about, and I agreed with it 100%. But he fills in the details here, and they're interesting to look at. You probably sit back if you're watching the playoffs, and we had this unbelievable hour here of baseball where the Rangers are up 2 runs. They're 2 runs in the 8th inning, and they bring in Aroldis Chapman, the flamethrower. And immediately, I think it's Joe Davis doing the game, says, Chapman's been known to shrink in these kind of situations to give up big home runs. But he got Alex Bregman on the first pitch to fly out. He got the second out. And then Yordan Alvarez hit a ball that may still be traveling on the first pitch. Kaboom! It was out of the park. So now it's a 1-run game. And Bruce Bochy brings in Jose Leclerc to get 4 outs, which isn't seemingly a big problem until Leclerc throws 9 straight balls So he's got runners on first and second. There's 2 outs, and, well, a base hit at that point drives in the tying run, and if it's like a double, they take the lead there. But Leclerc gets the next batter to ground out to third base. He's out of the inning and is able to close it out in the 9th. Then you wait for the start of the Phillies game, and you wait for something to get going. Doesn't take long. Doesn't take long at all. In fact, on the first pitch of the game, Kyle Schwarber hits a home run. Talked about it afterwards.
The biggest thing is obviously Wheels went out there, great first inning, and fans are into it. And you're wanting to kind of hop right on Gowan there, and I'm sure he didn't mean to to throw it where the location was, but was able to put a good swing on it, and it just gets the crowd. Wow, talk about a fun crowd where you're around the bases, you're looking around, and you're seeing a frenzy, and it can put an extra, just an extra layer onto what an atmosphere is already. And Trey goes out there, puts a really good swing on the ball, and then Harp follows up with another home run and adds on to another layer. So can't say enough about what the crowd was tonight. They were with us all entire night, and looking forward to getting back here tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow now, tonight. That place was wild last night. And what Schwarber is doing to totally remake the leadoff position is remarkable. He hits below 200, but he walks a lot, and he hit 47 home runs. And while he is nothing like Rickey Henderson, who's considered the greatest leadoff hitter of all time, a 279 career hitter, stole more bases than anybody else in the history of baseball, and when he was in his prime was hitting above 300, the idea was he would get on base and make something happen, make the pitcher nervous, steal first, steal second, maybe even steal third. He was also very good with leadoff home runs, but nothing like Schwarber here. And what the Phillies have done here is they've taken a power hitter and they've said to other teams, okay, watch this. Pretty good chance he's either going to walk or he's going to knock one out of the park, and now you're playing from behind right away after, as happened last night, the first pitch. And so now Trey Turner gets on base, and boom, what happens after that? Who hits the first pitch after that? Why, it's Bryce Harper. Here he is.
We just didn't want to miss pitches over the plate, and we were able to do that and do some damage. It wasn't thinking about, hey, one pitch or not another pitch and just try to sit on this or sit on that. It was just trying to don't miss the ones over the plate, because when you get in deep into counts against him, he's really tough to hit. And I thought we just did a great job of really starting it off, and Schwarber, big swing right there, kind of get the crowd going and get us into it and get the vibe going. So just thought that was really good.
And more from Harper. This is, again, first pitch swinging, working out well.
Did you tell anybody before the game that the plan was swing at the first pitch you saw, hit a homer, and then watch the place go crazy for you?
Nah, I mean, it's I'm just very thankful to play this game. I'm very thankful to be able to, be in that spot, in that situation, and it's fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun. Being 1-0 in a series is huge, and we got a big one tomorrow as well. And that's a good team over there, man. They're not going to lay down, and thought they fought, and thought we battled as well. So I thought it was a good game won, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Harper, who was in the World Series last year, did not play on his birthday. I guess it was an off day the way it worked out. So he plays on his 31st birthday, and he hits the first pitch for a home run. So for the game, the three ex-Nationals, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, 5 for 11. They scored 4 of the 5 runs that the Phillies had, and they drove in 3 between the two of them. Pretty good night. So back to the Boswell column. Their ex-stars are shining, but Nats did the right thing. He says, let's imagine an imaginary world where Steven Strasburg and Anthony Rendon walk, and Bryce Harper, Trey Turner are re-signed to long contracts. Same thing with Juan Soto, who hit 35 homers this year for the Padres. And wow, wouldn't that be great? He says, no, not really. He says the correct decision was made on the 5 stars, and even a fan fantasy in which the big 3 stayed, the Nats now would have little else. Their rotation next season would be Trevor Williams, Jake Irvin, and Jackson Rutledge, then question marks. They would not have, as I go to the jump in the actual newspaper, Young and up-the-middle core pieces in C.J. Abrams, Keeper Ruiz, Josiah Gray, and Mackenzie Gore. They wouldn't have uncovered Lane Thomas and Joey Meneses in the game's remainder bin. They wouldn't have top 10 minor league prospects in Dylan Cruz and James Wood. Instead, their farm system would provide only a few useful ETAs in 2024 and 2025. Future bleak. The Nats might, in other words, strongly resemble the Los Angeles Angels, who went 73 and 89, despite having Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. Would they even be as good as the Padres, who won only 82 games despite having 6 big stars, not 6, but 3, in Soto, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis, Xander Bogaerts, ace Blake Snell, and closer Josh Hader. And, I mean, that's the point, is you have all these parts for the future. And I think the most important thing is, if you re-sign Bryce Harper, you wouldn't have your World Series, right? I don't think so. You would not have had Patrick Corbin, who, okay, he's become a really crappy starting pitcher now, but that season he was great. And the thinking was, okay, you still have your core of pitchers. That was, the plan that blew up in Mike Rizzo's face. But between Strasburg, Scherzer, and Corbin, you had a big 3 where free agents would say, hey, that's a place that I want to play and I can win. And maybe Trey Turner and Juan Soto, you're more likely to re-sign him. But the fact is they didn't. And so you really can't have, as I guess you would sum it up here, seller's remorse. And this paragraph sums it up for me perfectly. He says, for most teams, here's reality. You catch a wave, ride it as long as you can, then paddle out and wait for the next wave. And at my age, to have seen a World Series championship in Washington that didn't have baseball for 33 years, I'll take it. That's my perspective on this. So as I watch these stars who used to wear Nationals uniforms star in the postseason, I have to have the perspective of, yes, but 2019 was just wonderful. It was just a wonderful thing, and I'll never forget broadcasting the parade from on top of the National Museum of Art. That is a memory that will stay with me for the rest of my life, and I thank those guys who were a part of that, including Turner, and including Schwarber didn't play a part in that, but Max Scherzer, who will start tomorrow night, a big, huge part of that. All right, Ron Rivera talking yesterday to the media as the players had the day off. They have the day off today. Pulled 3 things that I think are significant. One is the Rivera report card on Sam Howell, who took 5 more sacks on Sunday but didn't turn the ball over.
Oh, I thought Sam was very efficient. That's probably the best way to put the way he played. His decision-making was, for the most part, really good. There was a couple times, obviously, I'd like to see him get the ball out of his hands a little bit quicker and not take the hits or sacks that he did. But I thought his quarterback rating was over 100, which was very good, because his decision-making was good. He protected the football, delivered some very catchable balls. There were a couple balls I still feel he we could have had completed, and we didn't, unfortunately. But I think, again, protecting the football and making the decisions that he did, I thought he handled those very well. Yeah, that's key. Look, he had the strip sack in the opener against Arizona, which cost him a touchdown. They won that game, and he threw the 4 interceptions in the ugly game against Buffalo. But by and large, he's been hanging on to the football, both in sack situations and in throwing the ball. This is on Jahan Dotson. Now, we go into this season looking at what Dotson did last year. I think he only played 12 games because of injuries, but he had 7 touchdowns, and a lot of people thought this would be a breakout year for him. Well, it's not. He had 1 target on Sunday, wide open, dropped the ball, and for the season, in the 6 games, has 17 catches and 1 touchdown. Not so good. This is the Rivera outlook on Dotson, and he says, don't worry, baby, we'll be okay. I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, again, as we continue to work and try and distribute the ball to all the players, it'll happen. It's just one of those things that sometimes guys will be targeted more. I mean, I promise you, back in the day, when Gary Clark, Art Monk, and Ricky Sanders were out there for Coach Gibbs, you guys were probably wondering, well, how come he only got 3 balls and everybody else got 6 or 7? I mean, it's going to happen. And so when a guy's not getting the balls right now, it's just a matter of time. And I think that's the thing we all have to be patient with. I mean, this is a good group of receivers, and I'm not saying that, they're that group, but they're a good group. and we're going to distribute the ball, based on game plans and who our opponents are. And again, it starts with the quarterback's decision making too.
Well, a couple of things here on history, Ron. Number one, the posse, which you referred to, Monk, Sanders, and Clark, they did very different things. Monk was the short yardage receiver. He played more like a tight end plays today, more like what Travis Kelce does. As far as Ricky Sanders, he was more of a deep threat, and he would benefit when the other two were covered. And Gary Clark, in an era where you could just clobber the receivers over the middle, boy, he had stones, and he'd go over the middle, and he'd get whacked, and he'd hang on to the ball. So they all did different things. With this group, I'm not sure. And is Doxson too similar to McLaurin? We don't know. One of the things, though, remember last year, Carson Wentz in the early going was hitting Doxson all the time and wasn't hitting McLaurin because, and the feeling was, well, McLaurin held out. He didn't participate in the offseason workouts, didn't go to minicamp, and Carson Wentz spent all this time with his timing with Doxson, so he's looking for him more. So there's that, and that's what Rivera said at the end. It's also on Hal to look for him. So we'll see as the season unfolds, but I would say it's been a disappointing year for Jahan Doxson based on what we thought might happen. Last thing is Emmanuel Forbes, who did not take a snap on Sunday. Didn't play at all after getting torched in the previous two games. And whether or not we'll see him against the Giants, I don't think you get really an answer here, but this was Rivera asked about how Forbes is handling the benching.
Well, I think he's been great. He really has. He and I had a conversation last week as to what was going on. Just explained to him that, we feel right now a little time down would help you. Good chance to kind of take a step back and watch it and see how things are done, see a little different perspective. And again, he's been really good so far, and I expect him to continue. He's a young pro who's got a lot to learn and a lot of growth to have, but he's got a chance. We really think this young man's got a great skill set and can be a good football player. It's just this might take a little bit more time.
To Forbes' credit, he has talked about this with the media and has kept his head up. He's not pouting about this, and even though he was a first-round draft pick, and much more was expected, and he was supposed to be the big reason that they would change their luck on turnovers, and I guess it did with him not playing at all, because they weren't doing very well on turnovers going into that game. They were near the bottom this year at -5 going into the Falcons game, but Desmond Ridder served them up 3 turnovers, and that was very helpful. Now, I would imagine, just because of injuries and maybe he does improve in practice, that he'll get back on the field. And really, if you've invested a first-round draft pick, you can't afford to keep him on the bench for the rest of the year. But right now, it's not working out for him too well. Tom Lavero, by the way, has a note in his column today, ripping Jack Del Rio. And I didn't hear this, but I guess Jay Gruden is going into the hot take business. He's given up on the idea of ever coaching again, it seems, and is doing a lot of sports radio, and he was on Kevin Sheehan's podcast, and he described Jack Del Rio as Simple Jack. He says, I feel like he's Simple Jack. He doesn't do a whole lot defensively. They play limited coverage fronts and expect their players to be in the right places. They play how they're going to play and hope that they're better than you are. So he's saying Jack Del Rio must think he's got the best talent in the league, because that's the way he's setting up his defense, and he's not fooling anybody with anything fancy. Simple Jack. Ooh, that stings a little bit. But, we could also point to Jay Gruden and say, Simple J, who ran Club J, didn't run a tough operation, and made the playoffs once in 5 years. So who knows? We're going to do a lot of college football today. Lauren Druhan joins us every Tuesday, big on college football. She lives in Los Angeles, and we'll talk about what's going on with USC, which kind of laid an egg at Notre Dame on Saturday night. David Pollack was with Dan Patrick yesterday and talked about USC as well. We'll get to that. Plus, Robert Griffin III has a podcast, and this is a couple weeks old, and I was not aware of this until yesterday, but I pulled some of it. He had Josh Harris on his first podcast, and there's some nuggets there which deserve to be dust it off a little bit. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right. We are rolling until noon today. Tony has the day off today, as he does most Tuesdays. Lauren Druhan will join us at 10 o'clock to talk some college football. I'm going to get to Robert Griffin III and this new podcast he has. He, oh God, his revisionist history is always fun to pick apart. And we'll do that in a little bit. But David Pollack, who was excellent on ESPN. I don't know how these decisions are made. Maybe it's based on contracts. Who knows? But I thought he was one of the better college football analysts they have. I don't understand how he was let go. But he's a man without a job now, and he appears from time to time on the Dan Patrick Show, as he did yesterday. And they were talking about the various college football issues, including USC, which you knew they were going to be vulnerable on defense, and they were against a Notre Dame team, which is probably not the best offensive team in the country, but they can score, and they're playing them on the road. And they got smoked, and that led Patrick to ask David Pollack this question.
How does USC not have a defense?
Okay, so your defensive philosophy leaves a lot to be questioned. They believe in stunting up front, the majority of the time. They believe in playing deep coverage. The way they've recruited, obviously, you can tell that a lot of the bullets go to the other side of the football, which is fine. But a system that is, listen, if you want to be honest, it's just not the system that builds you don't see a lot of toughness. I don't see a lot of physicality, let's put it that way, on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And we've seen over the years, whether you spread it out and put more emphasis on quarterbacks and speed and the outside, in the end, if I got guys that can win in the trenches, I can change the numbers advantage that everybody likes to play with. And I just don't see a lot of, blocking for Caleb Williams up front was a struggle. The defensive line stopping the run and getting a consistent pass rush was a struggle.
But
so
is
the
it
line
talent,
of scrimmage,
David? Is it talent that they're lacking, or is it philosophy that they're lacking?
I think that I don't think they have a lot of depth of talent up front, but I do think the philosophy needs to continue to be tweaked. So I will say that I think they could do more with what they have.
Talking to David Pollack. Georgia looks vulnerable. Like, it feels like there's not a great team. So you handicap your alma mater.
Well, Brock Bowers being banged up changes it too. Yeah. Let's see what comes out about him. But I would be surprised if he's back in the next couple weeks. And they're an offensive team. I think they're a team that you're going to have to depend on. Carson Beck, he's a flamethrower. Like, that dude's got an arm. He's got poise. He's got weapons with McConkey, and you see Ra Thomas starting to come on, another transfer from Mississippi State. So I think they're good enough to score with anybody. Stopping people is going to continue to be a challenge. You saw it with Vanderbilt again. The defense is, if you turn on a game the last 2 years and you watch Georgia's defense and you turn it on now, you're like, what happened? And here's the thing. You don't have runs like that. Like, all of those guys that you saw during those 2-year run, they're all playing on Sundays. If you turn the tape on, like, you start watching Sundays, like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. That guy played defense at Georgia. That guy played defense at Georgia. All 11 of the defensive starters for the first national championship, they all got drafted. So, it's going to look different. But if you look at the schedule, Ole Miss is going to be a problem. A running quarterback with a system that can also run the football, throw the football a little bit more. But again, that's at home. Missouri is their next toughest game. That's at home. So it is a tough place to go to walk into with that crowd, that noise, that atmosphere. It's tough for anybody to go in there and win.
Colorado's up big on Stanford. A lot of people probably turned that off. It was a Friday night. How big a story is Colorado now in college football?
I think the people that wanted to line up and take shots at Deion, it's a big story for them now. Like, they're excited about that. But man, that was a colossal failure the other night. That was, you're up 29-0 on an anemic offense in Stanford. You built your team around a Travis Hunter type guy who got beat all night and just got beat all. And listen, the thing I would say watching that is, okay, if I'm Colorado, at what point do I go, I'm up 29? Let's run the football. Let's eat some clock. Let's not play fast. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, but you're not
so
expecting Stanford to come back, though. I mean, I guess in fairness to Deion in Colorado, they want to continue to, put up big numbers there, let everybody see what they're doing there. I don't think they were thinking, Stanford could come back. We got to run the clock.
Well, and then you look up and you say, see what happened was. I mean, so and that's the thing, man. Do you want style points? Sure. If you want style points, let it rip. But, man, I want to win football games. And when you lose to it, when you have this and you're trending and you beat TCU, and obviously that's not like a big win now. We see that. TCU is not a great football team. But when you start to build momentum, here's the thing. It's easy to build momentum in the beginning of something. Like a lot of coaches come in and build momentum and build energy. The hardest thing to do is sustain it. And when you start losing to 1-4 Stanford, and now the ship looks a little bit different, and creating that tidal wave of recruiting and creating the energy and the buzz, man, it's hard to continue to do. You only kind of get that one shot at it. And I think this kind of takes them down a notch and puts a little chink in the armor.
That's David Pollack. I was chatting during that, excuse me. But, I had some interesting things to say there. And we'll talk more about the Deion situation, but it did seem to peter out. And I was interested in seeing this yesterday. Andrew Siciliano was filling in for Rich Eisen. Eisen did a couple of games in London, including the game Sunday, so he's not quite back in Los Angeles. But Andrew lives in Los Angeles, and he was talking about the game, and he said that he went to bed at halftime, even on the West Coast. Now, the game didn't start here until 10, so halftime was pretty close to midnight. And by the time the game ended with the overtimes, you're talking 2:30 in the morning, something like that. And even on the West Coast, people went to bed. So it's interesting how that played out. And I wonder what the rating was at the end of the game, especially with so many people checking out at 29-0 at the half. All right, to Robert Griffin III. And RG3 continues to say that he'd like to play. He says his reason for not being signed is there would be too much of a distraction if he were to come in as somebody's backup. No, not anymore. Nobody cares. Nobody really cares. It wouldn't be a distraction. The reason that you're not signed is they don't think you can play. And more evidence of that was what the Giants did yesterday. Giants are going to play Washington this week, and it's probably going to be Tyrod Taylor unless Daniel Jones can get healthy pretty quickly. He's coming off a neck injury, which kept him out last week. But they went to, not only did they go to, like if you go to a bookstore like a Barnes & Noble, you'll see the table where they have the books that have been around for a long time and they're selling for a fraction of what they cost. And often they'll have books in the front of the store in a rack that say, just take them, just get them out of here. And that's where the Giants have had to go as they look for a backup quarterback for this upcoming week. So they worked out yesterday quarterbacks Matt Barkley and Ian Book. Okay? These are the guys that are out there that are getting looks, and you're not, RG3. Barkley has played 19 games in his NFL career, starting 7 of them. He was taken by the Philadelphia Eagles in 2013, played for Arizona, Chicago, San Francisco, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Tennessee, Carolina, and Atlanta. It's been with a couple of those teams more than once. Book has played just 1 game, which he started in 2021, went 12 of 20 for 135 yards and 2 interceptions. And he was a 4th-round pick of the Saints in 2021. These are the guys that are out there. And sorry, Robert, your phone's not ringing. It's not happening. So he is very good on television. He was good last night wearing his pink suit again. I guess that's going to be his trademark on the Monday Night Countdown show. And he does very good work. He has also started a podcast. And who did he have on for his first guest? He had on an owner who he'd like to schmooze up to because, well, first he said, this was a number of months ago, that Josh Harris was talking to him about becoming a part owner. Well, that didn't happen. Now, he did come back for the first game or the second game and got a big ovation, okay, as he should. He gave Washington an unbelievable year in 2012. But now with this podcast, he's taken on the role of, and it's hard to do radio or a podcast by yourself. I understand that, and especially if you don't have experience doing it. So this is RG3 introducing his guest, Top 40 Radio style.
So now, to welcome one of the first guests to RG3 in the Ones, we got the man, the myth, the legend, the one who rebuilds and revamps sports programs and organizations, the one who absolutely saved my team that drafted me, the one, the only, Josh Harris. Welcome to the show, brother.
Great to be here. Great to be here. That's quite an introduction.
You should take me everywhere with you.
I might.
I'm going to hold you to that now.
I know he will. Yeah, he's going to say, yeah, you're going to take me with you. Notice that he said, my team, and then quickly qualified it with the team that drafted me, because it wasn't his team for a while. And he was also going to write an explosive book about sexual harassment in the organization, which didn't get off the ground. And last week we had Gary Myers, who was the ghostwriter for that book. And while he was not able to say too much about it, the implication that RG3 and his wife gave that he had been sexually harassed in the organization, apparently there really wasn't much to that. Now this is RG3 with conversation with the owner, with Josh Harris, which sounds to me like he's still looking to play. You didn't say it here, but it sounds like that. And also this contention, and I'm going to clear this up too, that he was forced to go out there, and that's why he got hurt. Listen to part 2 of Robert Griffin III on his podcast with Josh Harris.
I gave my football life to the Washington Commanders, and, my knees and everything in between. But to give me the opportunity to come back and have your team, instruct your team to have me do the welcome home video, because I had been away from the franchise for so long, and so many other alumni had been away from the franchise for so long, it meant the world to me. And to be able to run on the field again with my daughters out there and get the reception from the fans, like I told you, and this, the fans have always been the foundation of the franchise and what makes it go. When the fans show up, the team is better. It's not always the team being better making the fans show up. So I just wanted to say personally, thank you for that. Thank you for being inclusive and allowing me to be in your circle. You say, and if I ask you to do the podcast, you can do the podcast. And it's like, listen, man, if you ever ask me to do anything for the Commanders, I'm there in the drop of a hat, drop of a dime. And I really appreciate that from you.
I love to hear that. And you're welcome anytime. And it all reverberates back, right? At the end of the day, treating people right, having them come back, like everyone, sees, everything you do in sports, and you're, on the one hand, you have an incredible opportunity, but on the other hand, you live in a lot of scrutiny, and that's why, these types of things are super important. And, you being back is super important. I mean, the loudness of the, cheers that, when you showed up in the suite and all that was, important. So you're welcome anytime.
Yeah.
Please come back.
Well, and I'm sure he will. And it was a good move to bring him back. Nothing wrong with that. But when Griffin says that he gave his knees for the franchise, let me explain what happened here. Late in the season, and he's having a great run. I give him a lot of credit for this, because they were 3-6 heading into a bye, and Mike Shanahan started talking about evaluating players for the following year. And Griffin said, I don't know about that. He said, I'm going to take the bye week. I'm going to come back, and I'm going to do everything I can to take this team to the playoffs. And he did. And they started rolling. And they were playing a game against Baltimore at FedEx Field with about, I think there were 3 games left in the season. This was the 4th to last game of the year. And he collided with Haloti Ngata, and his knee went the opposite direction, hyperextended knee. He should have sat out the rest of that game and probably sat out the rest of the regular season. But no. He ran right past Dr. Andrews, Dr. Beanie, who's on the sideline, got himself back in the game limping. Finally, he had to come out. Kirk Cousins rescued that game. He took it to overtime and then won the game in overtime. The following week, they played at Cleveland. Griffin didn't practice all week long. He was not going to rule himself out. And I was told by an orthopedic surgeon, that's an injury where you need to sit 4 weeks. He was thinking he'd get back on the field without missing a game because he was very insecure about his job and Kirk Cousins playing. So before this game against Cleveland, I'm watching the pregame show, and Griffin is in shorts, and he's running all over the field, cutting left, cutting right, everywhere. He's looking like he's warming up to play in the game. And as Mike Shanahan tells it, before the game, Griffin and Dan Snyder came up to him, to Shanahan, and said, we're ready to play. Let's go. And Shanahan said, well, I haven't practiced all week. I got a game plan installed for Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is going to start. He's going to play the game. You're inactive. And that was that. Griffin sat in the stands with his dad, watched Kirk Cousins beat Cleveland, not running the pistol, which is what he ran because he was a different type of quarterback. And he and his dad decided that Shanahan was trying to get him injured to undermine his career so that he could play Kirk Cousins. And Griffin came back to practice after the Cleveland game with a list of about a dozen plays that he wouldn't run, wasn't going to run because he didn't want to do that anymore. He's going to be Aaron Rodgers. And Mike Shannon said, well, that's how we won this year. We won doing that. We're not going to change course with you. If you can't play, we'll play Kirk. Oh, no. Back on the field. And they won their last two games playing basically a running offense. I mean, Alfred Morris was terrific against Philadelphia and particularly effective against Dallas last game of the season where they won the division. He ran for 200 yards. And then Griffin, still limping, still playing on a knee, probably shouldn't have been playing on, managed to get a 14-0 lead against Seattle, but re-injured the knee. It was clear that happened. They said, oh, no, he just moved the brace up and he had to adjust it. No, he was hurt. And he insisted on playing in the game, dragged his leg all over the field in the first half. Shanahan came to him at halftime and said, we're going to make a change. And Griffin wigged out right in front of the team, screaming at him, cursing at him. Okay, you can't do this for what I did for this team. So Shanahan looked around the locker room, made a call, kept him in the game, and his knee blew out in the second half. So this notion that when you make it sound like, oh, I gave my knees for this team because they needed me to go out there. No, you played because you insisted on playing. Let's make that clear here, okay? Let's clear that up. All right, last thing with RG3, and I think this is good on his part for asking about this. It's about the controversy over the fields, that the players are saying we want all the fields to be grass. FedEx Field has grass, and Josh Harris inherited that. He didn't say, oh, let's go to turf so we can save money. He's staying with grass. But there are owners, and particularly you look at like the MetLife Stadium where the Jets and Giants both play, where they don't want to have grass because it's going to be too much money to keep replacing it all the time with a game every week and other things that they have at that stadium. So this is Griffin on the field circumstance, and Harris kind of being a little bit on the defensive about this because as owners, they want to stand united as to how they are not forced to spend money if they don't have to on grass fields. Here we go.
There's a big issue with turf versus grass, and how when the World Cup gets here, all the NFL stadiums are changing out their turf and turning it into grass because that's part of the requirements for it coming to the United States. Where do you as an owner sit on turf versus grass and whether the NFL stadium should all be natural grass? Because I know from my own experience, I've been hurt on both turf and grass. But the grass at FedEx probably wasn't real grass for many, many years.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, I'm focused on. I mean, you have a tremendous investment, in your roster, right? And you got to sort of be looking out for people. And so, like, I'm sort of focused on, player health, player safety. I mean, obviously, I'm taking a little bit of, my lead from the NFL, but that's going to guide me through all this. And so that obviously leads you in one direction.
I know there's been a concerted effort, at least at FedEx over the years, to try to improve the grass. Is that something that you guys have also taken on with taking over the team? Or do you feel like the grass at FedEx is in a much better spot than it was maybe in the past?
I think it's in a better spot, but, I think that it's going to be hard to do much more than what was done during the season. And so, like, we're going to take a good hard look at it in the, when we get a chance. I think it's in a better spot than it was, though.
Yeah. I mean, it was like sand when I was back there playing. You could see us. We'd run into the left sideline and kicking up sand behind us like a Tasmanian devil. So I definitely think it's in a better place now.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that obviously we've been fixing, from literally just putting in hot tubs that were needed to Gatorade stations to game clocks in the training facility to new carpet to, a tent for the families. But certainly if, the grass, player safety, I mean, having people play in an area that to leaks, That's an area that that we're going to keep pretty focused on. It's important, and again, we want to be the destination of choice for NFL players. The NFL is a small community.
Right.
People know who the good teams play for and who the good teams aren't. The people don't treat people right. So you're going to see us erring on to go out of our way to make it a great place and a hospitable place. And there's nothing more important. I mean, as the average life of an NFL player is less than 4 years, which is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to all work on that. That's not a sustainable place for anyone to be, and it's not fair, not right. So that's something that if we can improve that, I'm interviewing right after this head of player wellness. It's going to bring together. It's what we have at Philly, where we bring together the docs, the trainers, the therapists, and we really talk about the player, as a whole person, and what are the things that they need to maybe come back from injury, maybe not get injured, maybe what is their specific blood look like? How can we advise them? I mean, players obviously they do what they want, but we want to make sure they all they have all the information about how to take care of themselves, and there's nothing more important than that.
That's Josh Harris, Commanders owner, with Robert Griffin III. Lauren Druhan is going to join us next. We'll talk some college football, and Ross Tucker in the next hour on a possible Super Bowl in London. Stay with us. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. And still a couple hours to go. In for Tony today, going till noon. And we'll hear from Ross Tucker later this hour on the idea of the NFL holding the Super Bowl in London. Crazy. Lauren Druhan used to work here as a producer, was on the air some, and she's a huge college football fan, grew up in the South, and now is in Los Angeles. And as we talked about last week, Lauren, the great benefit of West Coast time, that you can watch all the college football, no matter how late it goes, right?
Oh, it's so great. I think the latest game ended right before 9. It was awesome.
Okay, but we had a game on Friday night, and here's obviously here on the East Coast, the Colorado-Stanford game, which was 29-0 at the half. Even people who stay up late on the East Coast went to bed at midnight thinking this is over. Dion and Colorado are going to win. And I even heard Andrew Siciliano, who is based in Los Angeles for the NFL Network, say yesterday that he had gone to bed thinking that they had won. So I would ask you, on Friday night when the game ends, I'm still thinking pretty late because it started, at 8 o'clock your time, right?
I'm not exactly sure. I was still at work, so I'm not exactly sure what time it started. But yeah, it was probably earlier, and it probably still ended at a decent hour where, you're probably staying up. It's a little past my bedtime. I'm an early bird too. Yeah. But it's not horrible. You could stay up and still wake up at a decent time in the morning without being exhausted.
Okay. But point being is I wonder how many people in your neck of the woods on West Coast time also thought at 29-0, well, no point in watching the second half of this, right? I mean, I'm sure on the East Coast, the number for the second half was minuscule. And even on the West Coast, I'm thinking, how many people stuck with that? Would you have stayed with a game like that at 29-0, as big a fan? Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Colorado with the comebacks, it's honestly baffling. Dion knows how to rally a team, if anything, for sure.
Yeah, and the fact that they gave up the lead and the way, and Stanford is, it's a middling team now. They may win 5 games this year, maybe. And to do that. So, I mean, what's your sense of Dion now? Has a lot of the air gone out of the balloon, or do you think he's still a major story in college football?
No, I think he still is a major story in college football. I mean, he's doing some amazing things, and this is not the first time that the deficit has been a lot, and people have counted Colorado out just for them to come back and be like, oh my gosh, they made it a game, so I think Dion continues to be the story. Mm-hmm. I think there will be some spots open at some major schools next year, possibly. And the question is, does he stick with what he's building at Colorado, or does he make a move for a bigger school after 1 year at Colorado?
Yeah, I think the demand may be lessened a little bit, and I think, if this team like slips into a bowl with 6 or 7 wins, I think he's going to want to stay and make it a bigger deal next year, because he said, come at me now because we're as bad as we're going to be. So I think that, and I think this probably, at least my feeling is it shuts off some of the talk that he's going to be one and done, and he's going to be, somebody's going to come in with a chariot and take him off. I think he stays another year. Now, in your area, Caleb Williams, I had seen him play against Colorado, and I thought, oh my God, this guy is tremendous. And then what happened at Notre Dame on Saturday night, where he throws 3 interceptions and looked, I don't want to say ordinary, but I feel like that's it for the Heisman for this year. Did you get that sense as well?
Yeah, I did. I think there's too many quarterbacks that are playing better game after game than he has. I think that, he's a great quarterback, don't get me wrong, but you can't lose like that. You cannot lose like that in a fashion like he did, throwing 3 interceptions. If you're going to be the Heisman, you can't have a down game like that, no matter how good you bounce back. In my opinion, with the race, the race this year, you have more players in it than just quarterbacks. In my opinion, I would have that conversation. But I think he's done for sure. And
then earlier in the day, you had Michael Penix Jr., who I had seen play. My son went to Indiana, so I watched a little more Indiana football than I normally would. And he was always hurt. And he has gone to Washington, and they're top 5 now.
They're a force.
Yeah. What have you seen from them?
I think they're really good. I think I didn't want to admit how good they were at the beginning of the year. I think, me and my husband were having the conversation. I was like, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. And I just kept saying, we'll see. And, I think we've seen it.
Yeah.
They're good. Penix is good. It's great what they have going over here.
Yeah, and it just shows you, used to be that if a quarterback, flamed out in one place, he would, find his way to the NFL if he was good enough and try and work his way back. Now you have second and even third lives in college football, and some of these guys are playing in their mid-20s. You got guys. There was a story in the Post over the weekend that there are 3 or 4 quarterbacks in college that are older than some of the guys in the pros that have been there for, even Trevor Lawrence. You got players in college who are older than Trevor Lawrence is in his 3rd year now. Huh?
Right. Yeah. And I think we're going to see more and more of that as the NIL continues. These guys aren't just trying to make a resume for themselves, but now that they can make money, if these guys are, lower tier quarterbacks, like a Sam Howell or whatnot, and aren't getting drafted way up at the top, why not stay? Why not stay and make the money and then, okay, I'll sign the NFL contract, That's what I would do personally.
We're talking to Lauren Druhan, loves college football, is from the South, and as we talked about last week, there was going to be a difficult moment in her house last weekend because Lauren is an Auburn fan, and her husband, who is out of town, is an LSU fan. And Auburn went to LSU and pretty much got worked over. Not a close game. So fill everybody in on how things went between you and your husband, while the game was going on, and the post game after LSU had their way.
So we did not speak to each other at all during the game. No text, no anything. And then I got one little text probably an hour and a half after the game that said, "I'm sorry, babe."
That's it?
And that was it. We did not speak about it. But yeah, it was awful. I thought our defense was a little bit better than that. I knew LSU's offense was a force. They have one of the best offenses right now in college football. It's their defense that is their detriment. But yeah, we're just bad. That was not fun to watch. And now it's like, okay, Hugh, what are we going to do in year 2? Because I think the flip-flopping of quarterbacks is our detriment right now. I think it's doing more harm than it is good for us. And we just have a lot to figure out.
Your husband's not back from his trip yet, right?
No, he is not.
Okay, when he comes back, will there be any discussion of this game, or is this one of those things that you both agree we will never speak about that game again?
I don't think there will be any discussion whatsoever. It's just one of those games that doesn't really deserve a discussion. Like, there was not really anything where it was, which typically in the LSU Auburn game there is some sort of play or some sort of something where you could hang your hat and being like, well, if that went differently or if this went differently. And with this game, there just wasn't. Like, it was just a complete butt whooping all around.
Yeah. That's one of those. Like, if you get beat on the last play, it's much more bitter. But if it's just as you say, a butt whipping, it's like that. Defense in college football. You're looking at some of these games like Georgia. Georgia gave up 20 to Vanderbilt. They scored 37. They won comfortably. But as you look across, what's happened to all the good defensive players? Why do you think that it's such a situation now where you don't have a great team that's good on both sides of the ball?
I really don't know, Andy. It is a wild phenomenon right now. LSU's lacking a good defense. I mean, if LSU had a good defense, I really do think they would be in the national championship conversation right now.
Yeah.
Georgia's the same way. Georgia's schedule is a bit easier with the East, but I don't know. The SEC East is, making a good run for themselves this year, but I really don't know. Auburn has always been sort of a defensive team. When our offense has stunk, our defense has carried us through.
Right.
But this year, not so much. So I don't know. I don't know if the caliber of players just aren't there this year. We're in a QB-rich season this year, so maybe it's just one of those years where we have a lot of great QBs and some subpar defensive guys. Do you think it's, and this is just a theory, because the NIL money is good for the offensive players who are much more visible, that the good defensive players are going to the NFL with eligibility still remaining, whereas quarterbacks and wide receivers are staying? Do you think that might have something to do with it? That's a great point. I haven't even really thought about that, but that very well could be. The defensive guys can sign probably bigger contracts in the NFL than they would be able to, at their school. So that's a really good point that I haven't even thought of. That probably is true. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at the amount of money that some of these guys can make, and now the NCAA is trying to get their arms around this. There are a couple of lawsuits that are pending right now, which could possibly pave the way for players to be paid. And then we're going to be in a whole different area. And how much, can you bid on a great quarterback coming out of high school if you got a salary cap, which is probably what they're going to have, right? Don't you think that's probably going to happen? I really do think that that's where we're headed, or else it's just going to be the wild, wild west. I mean, I really feel like it is the wild, wild west right now. Like, there are really kind of no rules, like teams are just doing it, and they're like, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness,
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I think that's really what's going on right now. And you have, like you mentioned last week, you have coaches being like, well, if you want us to win like that, we got to pay the players like they're paying the players. And so, I think a salary cap is something that could potentially be coming. I don't know what that's going to look like, especially with so many different conferences and divisions. It's going to look different for everybody. Not every conference is equal, with the money that they have. So that's going to be an interesting play into it. But it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out in the coming years, especially with the college football playoffs and what that may bring, the expansion, what that may bring for teams that might not, always be on the radar, now with the playoffs we currently have. It's and now as we look at some of these one-loss teams, you wonder if they're going to get in as well. I think that if you look down the line, this 12 teams, it's looking more and more like something acceptable. I really didn't like it at the beginning, but as you see the parity now in college football, because I was afraid some team was just going to get in there and just blow through it. We see teams that look unbeatable, like Georgia, may be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So I think, as this evens out with the money, I think we're going to see probably a pretty more competitive postseason than we've been seeing in college football.
I think. Don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think the college football expansion is going to be great for the game, especially, if you look at, 1 through 25 right now. There's a lot of good teams in the top 25 that, they haven't really solidified their destiny. And I know we're only, 7 or so games into the season, but, I mean, there's a lot of teams where it's like, okay, well, if, this team played this team, I'm curious to see who would win, you know? So it's going to be interesting for sure. I think it's going to be good for college football. And, good for those teams that aren't, the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Georgias, the Alabamas, where they're in the conversation every year, but they may be real good, like the TCU thing last year that we saw, So it'll be interesting to see more teams like that getting into the playoffs and getting their shot at, those bigger guys.
And just for an example, this week you got 17 Tennessee playing at 11 Alabama, and going into the season, go Alabama at home, forget it. Man, that could be, that's one there, and then Penn State playing at Ohio State. Ohio State, they were down 10-0 to Maryland. They had that very close call at Notre Dame. So yeah, things are really evening out right now, and I thought that the NIL would be bad for college football in terms of watching the games themselves. I feel like it's as good as it's ever been, because it is. Don't you feel that way? Right? Yeah.
It is, and NIL has changed the game. I was on board with NIL from the beginning. I wasn't on board from the beginning with the transfer portal. Right. But I think hand in hand with those two things, it's done wonderful things for college football. And I'm just, like I said, I'm more excited to see where the college football expansion takes us, and the things that college football does, in the future, and what that may do. I'm just excited. College football is better than it has ever been, and it's exciting.
All right, big spread at your house again Saturday for all the games, because I saw your display of food on Facebook. Are you putting out a big spread again this weekend? Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's the Auburn Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. LSU's playing nobody fun. He'll still be out of town anyways. So I don't know. We'll see. I may switch it up. I may do some wings.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right.
Maybe a little taco board. I don't know. We'll see.
Very good. All right, we'll catch up next week. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
That's Lauren Druhan, college football big fan, major fan, as her team went down in flames last week. But as I say, the college football is better to watch, I think, than it's ever been. And I thought, oh God, this transfer portal and the NIL, it's going to. No, it hasn't. It's made it more competitive. And like I mentioned, these two games, those are probably the two top ones on the schedule. Penn State number 7 at number 3, Ohio State, and Tennessee at Alabama. I think you could look at those games and think they could go either way. You'd favor the home teams, and they're ranked higher, but this is the kind of year it's college football, and I think with the talent spreading out with the NIL and the transfer, it's made it more interesting.